The phone slipped from my trembling fingers, clattering to the floor as the video continued to play. There he was, Walter Johnson, the husband who had vanished 30 years ago without a trace, now sitting comfortably beside the woman he had always desired. But what shattered my heart into a million pieces wasn't seeing his face after all these years. It was watching my daughter Sophia nestled affectionately in Nancy's arms, calling her mom with the warmth and tenderness I once believed was reserved only for me. My name is Martha Johnson, and at 60 years old, I finally learned that some debts can never truly be repaid, especially those of the heart. When Walter disappeared 3 decades ago, he left behind nothing but crushing debt and our 1-year-old daughter crying in my arms. The day after he vanished, debt collectors began pounding on our door. They took everything of value from our small home, and when that wasn't enough, they kept returning, intimidating me with threats, overturning furniture and smashing dishes. The nightmare that engulfed my life wasn't just about the money he owed. It was about the broken promises, the stolen future, and the burden of raising a child alone while running from creditors who treated me like a criminal for my husband's sins. For 6 long years, this torment continued. I would wake in the middle of the night, heart racing at the slightest sound outside our door. Would today be the day they'd return? I worked 3 jobs simultaneously, cleaning offices before dawn, waitressing during the day, and doing data entry at night while Sophia slept beside me. My hands became rough and calloused, my back permanently curved from exhaustion. But I never complained, not once. "You'll never make it," my mother warned when Walter first left. "A single mother with that much debt, you should declare bankruptcy and move back home." But giving up wasn't an option, not just for my sake, but for Sophia's. I refused to let her grow up believing that when life knocks you down, you stay down. So I fought tooth and nail for every penny, every opportunity, every moment of respite. The worst moments weren't the physical exhaustion or financial struggle. They were watching Sophia suffer for her father's choices. Children can be unbearably cruel. Deadbeat's daughter. They'd chant in the schoolyard, chasing her until she'd come home with tears streaking her dirt-smudged face. Each time, I'd pull her close, whispering promises that things would get better, that we'd prove them all wrong. By the time Sophia entered elementary school, I had managed to settle most of the major debts. Our home finally began to feel like a sanctuary rather than a hideout. I remember the first night I didn't jump at shadows or check the locks 3 times before bed. It felt like breathing fresh air after years of suffocation. As the debts diminished, I began investing small amounts, $25 here, $50 there in stocks, recommended by a financial newsletter I found discarded in the diner where I worked. Most people dismissed it as a fool's errand, but I saw it as planting seeds for a future harvest. What's the worst that could happen? I'd think. I'm already starting from nothing. Over the years, those tiny investments grew, not dramatically at first, but steadily enough to give me hope. By the time Sophia graduated high school, I had paid off every cent of Walter's debt and had enough savings to help her with college expenses. By the time she married Alexander and had little Lily, I had built what many would consider a modest fortune, enough to retire comfortably and help my family live better than I ever could. I watched my daughter build a life for herself, complete college, start a promising career, and settle down with a husband who seemed to adore her. When she asked me to move in with them to help care for Lily while they worked, I didn't hesitate. After all, family takes care of family. That's the lesson I had spent 30 years teaching her through my actions every single day. What I never expected was that the man who abandoned us, who left me drowning in debt while he ran off with another woman, would suddenly reappear in our lives as if those 30 years of struggle meant nothing. That fateful night, when my friend Barbara's message revealed the truth, my world imploded. The video showed Walter, Nancy, and my own daughter, together laughing, embracing, sharing the kind of familial intimacy that spoke of long-established relationships, not recent reconnections. "Mom, I only recently got back in touch with Dad," Sophia said when confronted, her tone casual, as if discussing the weather. "It's been so many years. Whatever happened between you two, can't you leave me out of it?" But the video told a different story. This wasn't a recent reunion. This was a relationship cultivated behind my back while I worked myself to exhaustion paying off the debt her father left us with. "He said he didn't have a choice when he left," she continued, defending the indefensible. "He regrets abandoning me and wants to make up for lost time." The irony was almost too bitter to bear. That very evening, I had planned to tell Sophia that my investments had performed beyond expectation. I was going to surprise her with enough money for a down payment on a larger house for her growing family. Instead, I discovered that the daughter I sacrificed everything for had been secretly meeting with the man who abandoned us both. When Sophia realized there was no denying what I'd seen, her defense shifted from concealment to accusation. "Dad and Nancy were in love from the start," she said coldly. "He only married you because you were pregnant. You were the one who broke up a couple who truly loved each other." Those words cut deeper than any debt collector's threats ever could. How easily she dismissed 30 years of sacrifice, 30 years of unconditional love, 30 years of putting her needs above my own. In her eyes, I was the villain of this story, not the woman who had moved mountains to give her a stable life. That night, I packed my belongings and walked away from the house I had helped her buy. As I closed the door behind me, I heard her husband ask, "Are we really letting your mom just walk out like that?" Sophia's response revealed just how little she understood about the woman who raised her. "What's there to worry about? She's got maybe $200 to her name. Where's she going to go? She'll come crawling back by morning." And little did she know that the debts had been paid years ago, that my investments had grown substantially, that I now had more than enough to start over on my own terms. The next day, I purchased a beautiful apartment outright coincidentally, the same one Walter and Nancy had been eyeing. At 60 years old, I learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes those we sacrifice everything for are the least appreciative of our efforts. But I also discovered something else, that it's never too late to reclaim your life, to prioritize your own happiness, and to find peace after decades of struggle. The debts are paid now, all of them. Not just Walter's financial obligations, but my own debt to myself, the promise of a life worth living after years of putting everyone else first. The first time little Lily asked me why we didn't have any baby pictures of her mother, Sophia, my heart nearly stopped. How could I explain that those precious early photos were among the casualties of our chaotic escape, that they'd been trampled under the boots of debt collectors who stormed our tiny apartment, searching for anything of value after Walter vanished instead? I simply told her, sometimes the most beautiful moments are stored here, and tapped my temple gently. Not in photo albums. My journey of raising Sophia single-handedly began on a cold autumn morning 30 years ago. I'd been awake most of the night with our fussy 1-year-old daughter when I realized Walter hadn't come home. At first, I thought he was working late again. He'd been putting in extra hours lately, or so he claimed, by noon. When I noticed our joint bank account had been drained and his clothing gone, The terrible truth dawned on me. My husband had abandoned us. The first debt collector arrived just 3 days later. "Where is Walter Johnson?" the burly man demanded, thrusting a stack of papers in my face while my daughter wailed in her playpen, "These loans need immediate attention." I stared at the documents in disbelief. Personal loans, credit card debt, even a second mortgage I'd never signed for. All told, Walter had accumulated over $300,000 in debt, an astronomical sum in the early 1990s, debt I knew nothing about, debt that was now apparently my responsibility. "I'm sorry, but I don't know where my husband is," I replied, my voice barely audible above Sophia's cries. The man's face hardened. "That's unfortunate for you. Mrs. Johnson, these loans were taken out during your marriage, which makes them your problem too." That was just the beginning. Soon, our small apartment became a revolving door for debt collectors. They came at all hours during dinner, on Sunday mornings, even late at night. They took our television, our furniture, even the silver rattle that had been a gift for Sophia's birth. When there was nothing left to take, they simply sat in our living room, intimidating us with their presence, knocking over what little remained of our belongings. The low point came 6 months after Walter left. I returned home from my day job to find our apartment door broken open. Inside, 2 men were systematically destroying what little we had left, flipping over pots and pans, breaking plates, tearing cushions. Sophia, who I'd left with a neighbor, was spared witnessing this particular humiliation, but countless others would follow. That night, as I swept up broken glass and ceramic shards, I made 2 promises to myself. I would never again allow my daughter to live in fear, and I would pay off every cent of debt, no matter how long it took. The next day, I found our first hideaway, a tiny basement room in an elderly woman's home. Mrs. Collins needed help with daily tasks, and in exchange for light housekeeping and cooking, she let us stay rent-free. It wasn't much, but it was safe, and the debt collectors hadn't found us yet. With a safe place to keep Sophia, I took on more work. My days began at 4 a.m., cleaning offices before the regular employees arrived. By 8 a.m., I was waiting tables at a local diner, my feet already aching, but my smile firmly in place. Tips depended on it. Evenings were spent doing data entry from home, my fingers flying across the keyboard, while Sophia slept beside me in our shared bed. "You're going to work yourself to death," Mrs. Collins observed one evening, watching me massage my swollen fingers after a 12-hour day. "I have to," I replied simply. "If I stop, we'll never escape this debt." Just sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. 4 hours a night was a good night. Most evenings, I'd collapse into bed around midnight, only to jolt awake at 3:30 a.m. to start again. On Sundays, my only day off, I would take accounting classes at the community college. The instructor, taking pity on my obvious exhaustion, would sometimes let Sophia sit quietly in the back of the classroom with her coloring books. Despite our difficult circumstances, I was determined to give Sophia as normal a childhood as possible. I crafted homemade toys from discarded materials, sewed her clothes from fabric remnants, and read to her every night, no matter how exhausted I was. We celebrated birthdays with small, humble cakes I baked myself, and Christmases with one carefully chosen gift, wrapped in newspaper I decorated with hand-drawn stars. But normal was a relative term. By the time Sophia started kindergarten, we'd moved 7 times, always one step ahead of the debt collectors who somehow managed to find us every few months. Each time we fled, we left more behind: books, toys, the few mementos we'd managed to accumulate. School brought new challenges. Children, with their unerring instinct for difference, quickly singled out Sophia. Deadbeat's daughter, they'd taunt on the playground. Where's your daddy? Did he run away because you're ugly? Sophia would come home with tear-stained cheeks, asking questions I wasn't prepared to answer. Why don't I have a daddy like everyone else? Why do we always have to move? Why can't we have nice things? How do you explain financial destitution to a 5-year-old? How do you tell your child that the father she barely remembers left you both drowning in debt? I couldn't burden her with the full truth. So I created a gentler narrative. Your daddy had to go away for work, I would say, stroking her hair. And we moved because we're on an adventure, looking for the perfect home. As for nice things, I would smile. We have the nicest things of all we have each other. It wasn't until Sophia reached elementary school that our lives began to stabilize. I had finally managed to settle the most pressing debts through a combination of payment plans, negotiation, and sheer persistence. We found a small, rent-controlled apartment in a decent neighborhood, and for the first time in years, I dared to believe we might stay longer than a few months. With our housing somewhat secure, I could focus on building something more than mere survival. I enrolled in night classes to earn my associate's degree in accounting. Studying late into the night after Sophia was asleep, I dreamed of a job with regular hours, health insurance, and maybe even a retirement plan, luxuries that seemed as distant as the moon. By the time Sophia was 10, I had my degree and a junior position at a local accounting firm. The pay wasn't impressive, but the regular hours meant I could be home when Sophia returned from school. No more leaving her with neighbors or babysitters who sometimes forgot to feed her dinner. No more missing her school plays or parent-teacher conferences. You're different from the other moms, Sophia observed one day as we walked home from school. How so? I asked, wondering if this was going to be a complaint about our still modest lifestyle. You're stronger, she said simply. Jenny's mom cried yesterday because her dad came home late. But you do everything by yourself and never cry. Okay. If only she knew how many tears I had shed in private in shower stalls, in bathroom cubicles during lunch breaks, in the dark of night when she was asleep. But I was glad she saw strength instead of struggle. As the years passed, I continued climbing the professional ladder, moving from junior accountant to senior, then to department supervisor. Each promotion brought a salary increase, which went straight to paying down Walter's remaining debts. I lived frugally, buying secondhand clothes and furniture, clipping coupons religiously, and treating even the smallest luxury as a rare indulgence. Mom, why do you still buy generic everything when you make good money now? Sophia asked during her teenage years, embarrassed by our continued thriftiness. The truth was, by then, most of Walter's debt had been paid off, but the habits of extreme frugality were deeply ingrained, and I had started something new investing. Every dollar I didn't absolutely need went into carefully researched stocks and mutual funds. I was building not just a life, but a legacy. By the time Sophia graduated high school, our financial situation had transformed. Her college education was fully funded. Our apartment, though still modest, was filled with small comforts. And most importantly, the fear that had been my constant companion for so many years had finally begun to recede. Watching her cross the stage at graduation, tall and confident in her cap and gown, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Against all odds, I had raised a strong, capable young woman. I had paid off nearly all of Walter's crushing debt. I had created stability from chaos, security from abandonment, What I didn't realize then was that this hard-won peace was merely the eye of the hurricane, that Walter would return decades later with Nancy, the woman he truly loved, that Sophia would embrace them both, calling another woman Mom, while forgetting the mother who had sacrificed everything for her. But in that moment, watching my daughter smile in the sunshine, I believed I had finally won. That 30 years of unrelenting work, of sacrifice, of putting one foot in front of the other, even when I could barely stand, had been worth it. And perhaps in some ways it was not for the gratitude I never received, but for the woman I had become, in the process resilient, independent, and finally, after 30 years of caring for everyone else, ready to live for myself. The video on my phone screen froze on the most haunting image I'd ever seen: my daughter Sophia, nestled in another woman's arms, looking up at her with affection I once thought was reserved only for me. Mom, she called her, with a warmth that cut through me like winter wind. And there, sitting beside them, with a self-satisfied smile I'd recognize anywhere despite the 30 years that had passed, was Walter Johnson, my husband, who had vanished without a trace, leaving me with nothing but a mountain of debt and a 1-year-old child crying in my arms. How strange that a single moment captured on video could shatter 30 years of healing. 30 years during which I'd convinced myself that Walter was probably dead. It was easier that way. 30 years of rebuilding, of sacrifice, of creating a life for Sophia and myself from the ashes he'd left behind. Mom, are you still up? Lily's hungry? Sophia's voice called from outside my bedroom door, unaware that her world, our world, was about to implode. My granddaughter Lily was waiting for her midnight snack, a ritual I'd performed countless times since moving in with them 3 years ago. I'd moved in after selling my modest home to help Sophia and her husband Alexander buy this larger house in the suburbs. It was a decision made with love, an extension of the sacrifices I'd been making since Walter walked out that fateful morning in 1994. What a cosmic joke that now. Just as I was planning to share the wonderful news about my investments finally paying off, this specter from the past would return to haunt us. When Sophia pushed open the door, her eyes fell immediately to the phone lying on the floor, its screen still illuminated with the paused video. The color drained from her face as she realized what I'd seen. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice unnaturally steady as I picked up the phone. "And don't tell me that man isn't your father." The silence between us stretched like an endless highway before Sophia finally spoke. "Mom, I only recently got back in touch with Dad," she said, her tone casual, as if discussing a chance meeting with an old schoolmate. "It's been so many years. Whatever happened between you two, can't you leave me out of it?" "Leave you out of it?" I repeated incredulously. "You were there, Sophia. You lived through it with me." "I was a baby," she countered. "I don't remember any of it." But that wasn't entirely true. She had been old enough to remember the debt collectors who came banging on our door, old enough to remember being called Deadbeat's daughter in the schoolyard, old enough to remember the nights she woke up screaming from nightmares when any loud noise made her think the men were coming back to take more of our things. "He said he didn't have a choice when he left," Sophia continued, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "He regrets abandoning me and wants to make up for lost time. We just didn't tell you because we knew you'd get upset." The way she said it, so matter-of-fact, so dismissive of 30 years of history, made me question my own sanity. Was I overreacting? Was my anger misplaced? No. I remembered too clearly the day Walter disappeared. Sophia had been barely a year old. I was still out of work. having quit my job during pregnancy with plans to return once she was older. The joint bank account had been emptied. The debt collectors arrived within days, demanding money I didn't have. They took everything of value from our home: the television, the stereo system, the antique dining set that had been my grandmother's. When that wasn't enough, they kept coming back, barging in without warning, shouting, demanding payment. Some days they simply camped out in our living room, flipping over what little furniture remained, breaking dishes, intimidating me into finding money that didn't exist. That nightmare lasted for nearly 6 years. I raised Sophia on my own, working 3 jobs just to survive, just to pay off the debt Walter had left behind. I didn't have family to turn to. My parents had made it clear they'd warned me about marrying Walter, and now I was on my own. "That's all in the past now," Sophia said, interrupting my thoughts. "And besides, I just want a chance to feel the love of a father again. You can't expect me to give that up, can you?" "I can't believe it," I muttered, more to myself than to her. "I poured everything I had into raising you, and this is what you have to say." Then a thought struck me, one that had been forming since I first saw the video. "So all these years your father was missing. He was with Nancy Taylor." I lowered my eyes to look at my rough, cracked hands worn from decades of labor and sacrifice. Yet in that video, Nancy's hands were soft and well manicured, untouched by a single day of hardship. "Mom," Sophia said flatly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, "Dad and Nancy were in love from the start. He only married you because you were pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd long suspected Walter had feelings for Nancy back then. They'd dated briefly before we met, but to hear my own daughter state it so coldly, with such certainty. "You were the one who broke up a couple who truly loved each other," she continued, twisting the knife deeper. "If it weren't for you, Dad wouldn't have had to disappear for so many years and miss out on being in my life. You were the one who never let him go." Hearing her defend them so passionately, I couldn't hold back the fury that surged inside me. I raised my hand, almost striking her in a moment of blind rage that I immediately regretted. "You're going to hit me." Sophia stared at my upraised hand in disbelief. The noise drew little Lily and Alexander into the room. 7-year-old Lily didn't hesitate. She ran straight toward me, throwing her tiny fists against my legs over and over, shouting with each hit, "You're a bad grandma. I hate you. You're mean to my mom. I like Nancy better. I don't like you. You're old and ugly." Alexander stood there awkwardly, making no attempt to stop her. My heart sank as the realization washed over me to them. I'd always been nothing more than an outsider in this house, despite everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd built. I was just the old woman they tolerated because she helped pay the mortgage and babysit for free. I reached out to gently push Lily away. I barely touched her, but she stumbled and fell on her backside, bursting into dramatic, ear-piercing wails. Sophia shot me a furious glare and rushed to scoop her daughter into her arms. "Dad was right," she snapped, her eyes burning with anger. "You always explode like some hysterical lunatic whenever things don't go your way. So what if Lily hit you a few times? She's just a child. No wonder Dad left you for 30 years. I stared at her, stunned. I couldn't believe those cruel, gut-wrenching words had come from my own daughter's mouth. "So now you're saying it's my fault your father abandoned us?" A flicker of guilt crossed Sophia's face, but she still spoke coldly, defensively. "That's not what I meant. I'm just saying what's done is done. Can't you stop making a scene?" But I was already too tired, too hurt to argue with her anymore. "Give me Walter's phone number." She froze, her whole posture changing, suddenly alert, guarded, suspicious. "Mom, you're not planning to go after Dad and Nancy, are you?" I took a deep breath, unable to believe how foolish my daughter had become. I paid off your father's debts for decades. Now that he's back, why shouldn't I ask for what's owed to me? The bitterness in my heart was suffocating, all those years of sacrifice reduced to nothing in her eyes. And Sophia, without missing a beat, snapped back. You have no right to ask him for anything. You chose to pay those debts. I let out a bitter laugh, staring at the daughter I thought I knew. In that moment, I realized I'd never truly known her at all. I'd raised her for more than 30 years. Yet in her heart, I couldn't compare to a father who had never lifted a finger for her. Get out, I said, my voice shaking with fury. I don't want to see you again. This is my house, Sophia shot back, defiant and unapologetic. If anyone's leaving, it's you. She was sure I wouldn't go, convinced I had nowhere else to turn. When she got married, I'd sold my old house to help her buy this one. That's how I ended up living here with them. And she knew all of that. That's why she felt so secure now, why she could throw me out without a second thought. I let out a long, weary sigh. Earlier that day, I had planned to tell Sophia something wonderful when she got home, that all of Walter's debts had been paid off years ago, that an investment I'd made a few years back had skyrocketed in value. Not only was I finally debt-free, but I now had more than enough to buy her a bigger house, maybe even a new car. But now, none of that mattered anymore. Fine, I'll leave, I said quietly, with a bitter edge in my voice. I had struggled my entire life, thinking I could finally spend my twilight years surrounded by family, enjoying the joy of grandchildren. But in the end, all it took was a deadbeat ex-husband and an ungrateful daughter to tear it all apart. My life had become a cruel, twisted punchline in a joke no one was laughing at. I said nothing more. In front of all three of them, people I once considered family, I turned and began packing my things. Not one of them tried to stop me. They just stood there, watching as I gathered the pieces of my life into a suitcase when I was ready to walk out the door. Sophia suddenly called out, "Mom." For a second, my heart softened. I almost turned back. After all, she was still my daughter. I had poured everything I had into raising her. What mother could truly stop loving her child? I thought maybe, just maybe, she was going to ask me to stay. I was wrong. I turned around just in time to hear her say, "You can leave, but don't go bothering Dad." The faint smile that had just begun to form on my lips froze in place. I said nothing as I slammed the door behind me, and just as the door clicked shut, I heard their voices from inside. "Babe, are we really letting your mom just walk out like that? What's there to worry about? She's got maybe $200 to her name. Where's she going to go? This is just to teach her a lesson. She'll come crawling back by morning." Outside, I let out a bitter laugh. Little did they know, I had more than enough to start over to buy my own place, to live comfortably for the rest of my life without ever having to depend on an ungrateful daughter or the ghost of a husband who had finally materialized after 30 years, only to haunt me with his presence. Walter Johnson had returned with Nancy Taylor at his side and somehow managed to turn my own daughter against me. But he'd underestimated one thing. The woman I had become in his absence was no longer the vulnerable young mother he'd abandoned all those years ago. This time, I would be the one walking away, and I wouldn't be looking back. The slam of the door behind me echoed with a finality that should have broken my heart. Instead, I felt an unexpected lightness as I wheeled my suitcase down the driveway of the house. I had helped my daughter buy the house that, moments ago, she had made clear was no longer my home. What's there to worry about? She's got maybe $200 to her name. Where's she gonna go? This is just to teach her a lesson. She'll come crawling back by morning. Sophia's dismissive words to her husband Alexander floated through the window as I walked away. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. After 30 years of sacrifice, my own daughter thought I was destitute, helpless, incapable of surviving without her charity. Little did she know that the same determination that had carried me through decades of paying off her father's debts had also made me a savvy investor. The modest nest egg I'd built over years of careful investing had recently blossomed into a substantial fortune money I had planned to use to buy Sophia and her family a bigger home. Those plans evaporated the moment I saw the video of Sophia nestled against Nancy Taylor, calling her mom while Walter, my supposedly long-gone husband, looked on with smug satisfaction. That night, I checked into a modest motel for $50. The place was old, the room damp and musty, and the bed creaked with every move, but it was mine, a space untainted by betrayal. I barely slept, my dreams coming in jagged, restless fragments. Memories of the past I'd tried so hard to bury resurfaced, cradling a young Sophia in my arms while begging debt collectors at our door for more time, pleading for mercy while my baby cried. Back then, sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I was up before dawn every day, working 3 jobs just to make ends meet. I used to tie Sophia to my back with a cloth sling while I worked at the diner, and only when she was old enough for the local daycare did I finally catch a breath. I had clawed my way through those hellish years, paid every cent of Walter's debt, and now, just when I thought the worst was behind me, he had reappeared to destroy what little peace I'd found. Morning brought clarity. I sat up and checked my bank account on my phone, then noticed the calendar alert my monthly reminder to transfer money towards Sophia's mortgage. I stared at it for a moment, then calmly swiped my finger across the screen and deleted it. That simple action brought a faint, fragile sense of relief. For the first time in 30 years, I would put myself first. The first order of business was buying a new phone. My old one was nearly 8 years old, a birthday gift I had bought for myself when Sophia had once mentioned buying me a new one, but never followed through. After securing the new phone, I called a real estate agent. I wanted to look at move-in ready apartments, something fully furnished and easy to settle into. What I didn't expect was to run into Walter and Nancy at the very first property showing. There's a reason they say nothing burns hotter than hatred when enemies meet. That moment had finally come. Nancy appeared out of nowhere, clinging tightly to Walter's arm, as radiant and smug as ever. She was well into her 50s now, just like me, but somehow still looked like the pampered princess she'd been 3 decades ago, untouched by hardship, glowing from years of indulgence. The real estate agent, clearly trying to drive up the price, made a show of it in front of me. These two just returned from Germany. They're planning to sign the contract today. I let out a cold laugh, eyes fixed on Walter. Is that so? Since when can debt-dodging lowlifes travel abroad? Nancy didn't miss a beat, tightening her grip on Walter's arm like she was staking a claim. Martha, it's been decades. Can't you let go of my husband already? Your husband. I casually tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and looked her in the eye. Are you sure about that? Because last I checked, when Walter vanished, we were still legally married, and over all these years, I never filed for divorce. So you've spent all this time clinging to someone else's husband and still have the nerve to act proud of it. Walter wouldn't stand by while his precious Nancy got insulted. He pulled her into his arms, his brow furrowed in indignation. Martha, I admit disappearing without a word was wrong, but I'm here now to finalize our divorce. I couldn't help but laugh in his face. Of course you want a divorce now that I've paid off every cent of the debt you left behind. Not a moment sooner. My voice hardened. You can have your damn divorce, but every dollar I spent cleaning up your mess, every year of my youth I wasted carrying the burden you abandoned, I want it back. Until then, forget it. Walter gave me a look like he'd expected that. You haven't changed a bit. Still all about the money. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Anyone else could accuse me of being materialistic, anyone but him. A man who vanished after saddling me with his debts, who left a new mother to fend for herself against a storm of creditors, had no right to say a damn word. All the years of humiliation, sacrifice, and silent rage erupted in that moment. My eyes locked onto a broom leaning against the wall of the backyard patio. In one stride, I grabbed it and charged straight toward Walter. You bastard, who the hell do you think you are judging me? Me. You've got the nerve to come back now. I suffered for you, slaved away for you, picked up every broken piece you left behind while you played house with your mistress. 30 years you were gone. Why didn't you just stay dead? I seemed to be losing all control, swinging the broom with everything I had, fury pouring out with every strike. Walter darted around the room, stumbling and dodging, completely overwhelmed. No one dared stop me, not until I finally let out some of my anger and stood there, panting and shaking with rage. And just then, right at that moment, Sophia walked in. Mom, what are you doing? She rushed to Walter's side, shielding him like he was the one being attacked, her face full of concern for him and nothing but disgust and fury when she looked at me. Since the moment I'd left home yesterday, she hadn't sent a single message, not one word of concern. But now, for Walter, she'd shown up in the middle of the workday, dropping everything. Father and daughter stood united, while Nancy, who had been content to stand by smugly just moments ago, now casually sauntered over, almost as if to provoke me further. Sophia deliberately slipped her arm through Nancy's and leaned against her with exaggerated intimacy. Look at yourself, Mom, she snapped. Look at the scene you're making. Nancy is so gentle and graceful. And you're acting like some shrieking lunatic. She glanced around the room sharply, then added in a suspicious tone, Did you follow Dad here on purpose just because you found out he was buying this house? Only then did I remember why I was here in the first place. I glanced apologetically at the young real estate agent who'd come along with me, ignoring Sophia completely. I pulled out my bank card and handed it to the agent. I'll take the house. We can finalize the payment and sign the contract now. And please kindly ask these irrelevant people to leave my home. The real estate manager blinked, stunned by my decisiveness and apparent wealth. He hesitated, unsure whether to accept the card. Ma'am, don't you want to negotiate the price with the seller first? Sophia let out a laugh, thinking I was bluffing. Mom, please. You barely have $200 to your name. Stop pretending to be some high roller. Don't waste their time. Dad's already planning to buy this place. Nancy, too, looked at me with open disdain. Martha, all these years and you're still the same, always needing to win, always so obsessed with saving face. I had no intention of telling Sophia about my investments, how they'd surged in value, or that her mortgage was now in danger of default because I wasn't paying it anymore. Instead, I simply pointed at Walter. Of course I have money. Every cent of debt I paid for Walter over the years, I remember it all. If he wants a divorce, he can pay me back first. The young agent beside me, clearly uncomfortable with how they were treating me, chimed in on my behalf. If they were never legally divorced, She could file a claim and demand compensation for all those years of marital assets. Nancy's face flushed red, then pale, her expression flickering between embarrassment and disbelief. She turned to Walter with a look full of silent pleading. Walter, to his credit, still had some shred of dignity left. Seeing Nancy's pleading expression, he finally pulled a check from his pocket and held it out to me. I know I owe you. This is a check for $1 million. Consider it my way of making things right. Sophia looked like she was about to say something, but the moment her eyes landed on that check, she fell silent. I knew exactly what she was thinking. She was already calculating how much of that money she could get her hands on, thinking I'd take the check and, like before, funnel every penny back to her. I didn't give her the chance. I took the check without a word, turned to the agent and said, "Go ahead, process the payment and sign the paperwork." Then I turned to the rest of them. "What are you still standing here for, waiting for me to throw you out?" Walter gave me a look, then sighed. "Martha, let's go to the courthouse next week and make the divorce official." I didn't respond. He didn't know that 10 years after he disappeared, I'd already gone to court and filed for divorce under presumed death. Legally speaking, I wasn't divorced, I was widowed. I gave a half-hearted nod, just to brush Walter off, pretending to agree. Once he and Nancy left, Sophia, realizing I had no intention of talking to her, turned around and walked away too. Though the apartment was fully furnished and ready to move in, there were still plenty of essentials that needed to be bought. Thankfully, the young real estate agent who'd helped me earlier stayed behind and took care of everything, running around with me from room to room, helping unpack and organize. By the time everything was finally in place, it was already past midnight. Watching her drenched in sweat, working tirelessly without complaint, I felt a pang of guilt. She was about the same age as my daughter, and yet what a world of difference. How did I end up raising such an ungrateful child? The next morning, I was jolted awake by loud, relentless banging at my front door, so loud it sounded like someone was trying to punch a hole straight through it. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I peered through the peephole. There they were, Sophia, Alexander, and little Lily, standing at my door with several suitcases and bags in tow. "Mom, is this really going to be our new home?" Lily asked sweetly, eyes wide with wonder. Sophia knelt down and gently stroked her hair. "Of course it is, baby. This is Grandma's house, and from now on, it'll be ours too." Lily looked a little puzzled. "But Mommy, didn't you say you don't like Grandma? Why are we living with her now?" Sophia's expression froze for a second. Then she quickly cupped her hand over Lily's mouth and lowered her voice. "You can't say that in front of your grandma, okay? And besides, I'm her only daughter. All her money will be mine eventually. Why should she live in this big house alone while we squeeze into that tiny old place?" Even through the door, her words made my stomach turn. I didn't open it. Instead, I calmly picked up the phone and called the villa's property management office. "Hello? There are some strangers loitering outside my door, trying to force their way in. Please send someone to remove them and make sure they're never allowed onto the property again." Within minutes, security showed up. From behind the door, I could hear Sophia yelling and protesting, her voice rising higher and higher. But when the guards warned that they'd call the police if they didn't leave immediately, the three of them had no choice but to turn around and slink away in defeat. After Sophia and her family were kicked out, she started flooding my phone with messages. "Mom, you're really that heartless. I said a few things. And now you want to cut ties with me completely. Why can't you ever think about things from my perspective? Dad only has one daughter, me. He and Nancy never had children. If I stay close to them, their inheritance will eventually be mine. Is it really that hard for you to tolerate them for my sake? You used Dad's $1 million to buy a house and didn't say a word. And now you're holding a grudge against me. Fine, just don't come crawling back to me when you're old and useless, begging me to take care of you. I didn't respond to a single message. The more I stayed silent, the more unhinged her texts became bitter, spiteful, completely out of control. And yet, watching her unravel like this, I felt nothing but relief. She was losing her mind over the thought of me having a single million. What if she found out there was still a sizable investment account in my name? God knows how greedy she'd get. In that moment, I had to admit Sophia had inherited every ounce of Walter's selfishness. This family was well and truly broken. When I finally blocked every single number and contact linked to Sophia and her family, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Just like that, I erased them from my life. I booked myself a luxury travel package and set off on a month-long journey across the country. I'd spent my entire life sacrificing for others, first paying off debts, then raising Sophia, then helping care for Lily. I worked endlessly, never pausing to live for myself. Now, at nearly 60, I finally had nothing and no one left to hold me back. I made a promise to myself I would no longer live in service of anyone else's needs or expectations. From now on, my life was mine alone. With money and time on my side, I did whatever I pleased. I traveled from coast to coast, saw breathtaking landscapes, and realized just how vast and beautiful life could be. I used to think my world revolved around my little family, that I would spend my twilight years helping Sophia, cleaning up after her life. What a joke that had been. On my journey, I met people just like me, strong women, who had also been betrayed by ungrateful children. They too had chosen freedom over frustration, and we laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed life together. When people ask me now if I regret cutting ties with my daughter, I simply smile and say, the only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. Freedom, it turns out, is sweeter than family when that family only takes but never gives back. The irony wasn't lost on me as I settled into my new leather armchair, gazing out at the morning sunlight filtering through my living room window. Just 3 weeks ago, I had been unceremoniously thrown out of my daughter's home, and now I owned a luxury apartment outright, the very same one Walter and Nancy had set their sights on. Life has a peculiar way of coming full circle. My phone buzzed insistently on the side table. It was Sophia again. The 17th call today. I let it ring through to voicemail, just as I had done with the previous 16. After our confrontation at the real estate showing, I'd made it abundantly clear I wanted nothing to do with her or her father. She had chosen her side, defending the man who abandoned us 30 years ago and the woman he'd run away with. Let her live with the consequences of that choice. The voicemail notification pinged. Against my better judgment, I listened. "Mom," Sophia's voice cracked, thick with tears. "Something happened. Everything's fallen apart. Dad took Nancy and ran off with all our savings, every penny. Alexander said if I can't get the money back, he's going to divorce me. Please. Mom, I need your help." I sat perfectly still as her words sank in. Walter Johnson had done it again, disappeared with money that wasn't his, leaving devastation in his wake. Only this time, his victim wasn't me, but our daughter. The very person who had chosen to embrace him despite knowing what he'd done to us. Barbara, my longtime friend, who had first sent me the video of Walter, Nancy, and Sophia together, called me that afternoon with more details. "You remember how Walter showed up at your door a few days ago, begging for that $1 million check back?" she asked. I did. After I'd purchased the apartment, Walter had come crawling to me, humility etched into his face. "Martha, come on. We were married once. Just give me that money back for now. I swear I'll return it when things settle down." I told him to kneel and apologize if he wanted me to even consider it. To my surprise, he actually did it. I even made Nancy kneel beside him. Her face flushed with humiliation, but in the end, I still refused. That money was compensation for 30 years of suffering, not alone. Barbara continued, filling in the gaps. When the debt collector, who had long written off the possibility of ever seeing that money again, found out Walter was back, of course he came knocking. At first, Walter played the part of a reformed man, said he'd made it in business, said he could absolutely repay the debt. The collector, taken in by his polished appearance and confident words, gave him a few days' grace. But the truth was, she explained, Walter didn't have that kind of money. If he did, he wouldn't have been mooching off Sophia in the first place. It didn't take long before the debt collector realized he'd been duped again. Walter clearly had no intention of paying anything back. He was even preparing to disappear, just like he had all those years ago. Panic set in. The collector began showing up at Sophia's doorstep every day, shouting and demanding repayment, turning their household into chaos. Since Walter couldn't get the $1 million back from me, he turned his attention to Sophia. She hadn't suspected a thing until she found the home safe emptied out all their savings. Every piece of jewelry, every valuable item she'd hoarded over the years, including the gifts I'd once scrimped and saved to give her, gone. At first, she thought it was a burglary. She called the police, filed a report, but the investigation made everything crystal clear. Walter and Nancy had vanished again, just like 30 years ago. Worse, because Walter's legal identity hadn't been fully restored, he was still legally dead in the system thanks to my filing years ago. Tracking him down now was nearly impossible. He'd taken more than $30,000 in cash, and with the jewelry and valuables, the loss was easily over $500,000. "That's when I realized," Barbara said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Sophia had never been struggling financially like she made you believe. She'd only pretended to be poor just to keep bleeding you dry." Alexander, unable to bear it anymore, blamed Sophia for bringing a thief into their home. He gave her an ultimatum: recover the money or face divorce. With nowhere else to turn, Sophia came crawling back to me. I refused to see her. Some damage can't be undone. Some wounds don't heal with apologies. I had given her my entire life, and she had thrown it away for a father who never deserved the title. I thought that would be the end of it, a sad chapter closed in a book of disappointments. But a week later, Barbara called again, this time with news that sent a chill down my spine despite the warm June afternoon. "Martha, you're not going to believe this. The police finally connected the dots on Walter's past. Turns out, his so-called business success was a lie. He's been running small-scale scams in different states for years." According to Barbara, the money Walter had made over the years wasn't earned honestly. It was stolen. He had been running identity theft schemes, fake investment opportunities, and fraudulent contracts, cleverly staying just below the radar to avoid detection. That's how he'd managed to fund his fleeting life of luxury with Nancy. But this time, he wasn't so lucky. With both the debt collector and Sophia filing police reports, the authorities finally connected the dots. His name started showing up in old case files. Witnesses came forward. Patterns were matched. And the web of lies he'd spun for years finally unraveled. Nancy wasn't just a passive bystander either, Barbara continued. She helped him launder money, kept records hidden, and even posed as a business partner in some of the operations. The revelation struck me with a strange mix of vindication and sadness. For 30 years, I had wondered what kind of man could abandon his wife and baby daughter, leaving them drowning in debt while he escaped to freedom. Now I knew. Walter wasn't just a coward, he was a criminal. 2 days later, I received a formal letter from the district attorney's office requesting my testimony against Walter and Nancy Johnson in their upcoming fraud trial. Apparently, my decades-old financial records, which I had meticulously kept even after paying off the last of his debts, could help establish a pattern of fraudulent behavior dating back to the early 1990s. I agreed to testify, not for revenge, but for justice, not just for me, but for every person Walter and Nancy had swindled over the years. The preliminary hearing was held on a rainy Tuesday morning. I arrived early, dressed in a simple navy blue suit, my gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. I didn't expect to see Sophia there, but there she was, sitting alone in the back row, her face pale and drawn, dark circles underlining eyes that had clearly shed too many tears. Our eyes met briefly across the courtroom. For a moment, I thought she might approach me, but she remained seated, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I turned away and took my seat near the front. When Walter and Nancy were led in, handcuffed and wearing orange jumpsuits, I felt nothing, not hatred, not satisfaction, not even pity. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the harsh fluorescent lighting and the weight of their crimes exposed for all to see. The evidence presented was damning. Bank records showed a clear pattern of fraudulent activity spanning over 2 decades. Witness after witness described how Walter and Nancy had charmed them, gained their trust, and then disappeared with their money. Their stories echoed my own experience with painful familiarity. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke clearly and factually about the debts Walter had left behind, the years I'd spent repaying them, and the occasional cryptic communications I'd received from him, always without a return address, always too vague to trace. As I stepped down from the witness stand, Walter caught my eye. For a brief moment, I saw something like regret flicker across his face. But it was too little, too late, and we both knew it. The judge denied bail, declaring Walter and Nancy flight risks given their history of disappearing. They would remain in custody until trial, with charges including wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy spanning multiple states. If convicted on all counts, they faced up to 20 years in federal prison, outside the courthouse. A light rain was falling. I opened my umbrella and was about to hail a taxi when I felt a touch on my arm. It was Sophia. "Mom," she said, her voice small and broken. "Alexander filed for divorce yesterday. He's keeping the house. I don't know where to go." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her for the first time in weeks. The proud, defiant woman who had thrown me out of her home was gone, replaced by someone shattered, hollowed out by betrayal. In that moment, I saw myself 30 years ago, abandoned with a baby and mountains of debt. "I'm not asking for money," she continued hurriedly, misinterpreting my silence. I need advice. How did you do it? How did you start over with nothing?" I almost laughed at the irony. After all these years, after choosing Walter over me, Sophia was now in the very position I had been in when he first left. History had repeated itself with cruel precision. "You don't have nothing," I said finally. "You have what I had yourself. That's where you start." I turned to leave, but something made me pause. Perhaps it was the memory of those early days of single motherhood, the bone-deep exhaustion, the fear that never quite left. Or perhaps it was simply the recognition that Walter had victimized us both, in different ways and at different times. "There's a diner on Maple Street that needs waitresses," I said, not turning back to look at her. "The pay isn't much, but they're kind to single mothers. They let me bring you to work when you were little. Tell Helen that Martha sent you." With that, I walked away, leaving Sophia standing in the rain. Whether she would follow my advice or find her own path, I couldn't say. But I knew one thing for certain. Walter Johnson would never again be free to destroy another life with his lies and theft. And there was a kind of peace in that knowledge, a closure I had waited 30 years to feel. That evening, as I sat in my new apartment with a cup of tea, watching the rain streak down my windows, I thought about patterns and cycles, about debts paid and unpaid, about the strange, twisted road that had led me here. Walter and Nancy would pay for their crimes in prison. Sophia would pay for her choices with the collapse of her marriage and financial security. And me, I had already paid many times over throughout those 30 years of struggle. Now, finally, it was time to collect on life's debt to me, not in money, but in peace, in freedom, and in the quiet satisfaction of a life rebuilt from ashes. There are moments when life's greatest wisdom emerges not from our victories, but from our deepest wounds. After Martha severed ties with her daughter Sophia, she found unexpected peace in her solitude. Her luxury apartment became a sanctuary, her travels and education in joy she'd denied herself for decades. Yet despite her newfound freedom, something still tugged at her heart whenever she thought of little Lily. Children, after all, are innocent witnesses to adult failures. One afternoon, Martha received a troubling call from a school administrator. Lily's enrollment fees hadn't been paid, and the child might be forced to leave without hesitation. Martha contacted the school and anonymously prepaid Lily's tuition for several years. Because no matter what, she whispered to herself, a child deserves an education. As months passed, Martha watched from a distance as Sophia struggled to rebuild her life working multiple jobs, fighting for sobriety, trying to provide for Lily in a small trailer park. Martha quietly amended her will, establishing a trust fund of $200,000 for Lily's college education, not for Sophia, whose betrayal still stung, but for the granddaughter whose future remained unwritten. Some wounds never fully heal, but Martha discovered that forgiveness doesn't always require reconciliation. Sometimes it's simply choosing to break the cycle of pain, ensuring that innocence isn't punished for the sins of those who came before. In her twilight years, Martha found that true freedom wasn't just breaking away from those who hurt her, but reaching forward with quiet generosity toward a future she might never see. Friends, Martha's journey teaches us something profound about the human heart. When betrayal cuts deepest, when those closest to us cause the most pain, we stand at a crossroads. We can let bitterness consume us, or we can find the courage to protect what's innocent while honoring our own boundaries. True strength isn't measured by how completely we can sever ties with those who've wronged us, but by our capacity to remain tender in selective ways, even after being hardened by life's harshest lessons. Martha didn't forgive to welcome Sophia back. She forgave to prevent her own heart from becoming as calloused as the hands that had worked 3 jobs to pay off another's debts. This is the wisdom that comes only through fire. Forgiveness isn't always reconciliation. Sometimes it's simply refusing to pass down pain to the next generation. It's building a bridge that you yourself may never cross. But that might carry someone innocent to safer shores. Has someone in your life betrayed your trust? Are you struggling with setting boundaries while keeping your heart from turning to stone? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear today. If this story touched something in you, please subscribe to our channel for more powerful life lessons drawn from real human experiences. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another chance to find meaning in life's most challenging moments. And remember, your story isn't over yet. Sometimes the most beautiful chapters come after the most painful ones.